So how is it that drugs have the effects that they do? Most psychoactive drugs exert their effects by influencing synaptic chemical signaling. Basically, you have two types of ways that drugs can affect action at the synapse. A drug can be an agonist or it can be an antagonist. An agonist is any substance or chemical or drug that enhances or mimics the function of a synapse. An antagonist, on the other hand, is a substance that blocks or decreases the function of a synapse. Most of you are probably more familiar with the definition of an antagonist because those are often that word is often used when you have the hero and you have the antagonist in literature. And so antagonist would be the person that would be against the hero. So you can think of this and use this as a mnemonic device. So the antagonist blocks or tries to decrease the action of the drug. And the agonist is the opposite of that. It enhances or mimics the function of the drug. So hopefully that will help you with remembering the differences between the two. So there are a number of ways that drugs can act as an agonist or an antagonist at the synapse. So one, they can affect the synthesis of the neurotransmitter in the cell body axon or terminal. So they can affect how much of the neurotransmitter is made. Two, they can affect the storage of the neurotransmitter in granules or vesicles. Three, the release of the neurotransmitter from the presynaptic terminal, so more or less can be released. It can affect the receptor interaction in the postsynaptic membrane, so there can be fewer receptors or more receptors. It can also affect the inactivation of excess neurotransmitters at the synapse. So if you have more inactivation, then the neurotransmitters are removed from the synapse faster. If you have less inactivation, then the neurotransmitters will stay in the synapse longer and continue to affect the postsynaptic neuron. And similarly, you have reuptake into the presynaptic terminal. So drugs can affect how much neurotransmitters are reuptake or sort of taken back into the presynaptic membrane. So they can have more of them that are taken or cleaned up and returned to this presynaptic membrane, or they can have less of the neurotransmitter returned to the presynaptic membrane. And then drugs can also affect the degradation of excess neurotransmitter, so the basic breakdown. So you can have more neurotransmitter broken down or less neurotransmitter broken down in the synapse. And here is all of this summarized. So drugs can affect the synthesis of the neurotransmitter, the storage, its release, the receptor interaction, the inactivation of the neurotransmitter, the reuptake of the neurotransmitter, or the degradation or breakdown of the neurotransmitter. After the neurotransmitter is returned to the presynaptic neuron, then it can be degraded, broken down into pieces for additional use, and so some drugs can affect this degradation process. So these are the 7 ways that drugs can affect action at the synapse. And so remember, drugs are an agonist or an antagonist. An agonist would enhance or mimic the function of a drug, where an antagonist would decrease the function of the drug. So if you were to have greater synthesis, then this would be an agonist. If you were to have less synthesis, then this would be an antagonist. If you were to have greater release, then this would be an agonist. If you were to have less release, then this would be an antagonist. If you were to have fewer receptors, then this would be an antagonist. If you were to have more receptors, then this could be an agonist. If you were to have greater inactivation or greater reuptake, then that would actually be antagonist because it would be removing additional neurotransmitters from the synapse. However, if you were to have inhibition of reuptake or inhibition of inactivation, that would be an agonist. So this is just a review of how drugs can be an agonist or an antagonist as a function of how they act at the synapse.